Actor James Vanderbeek died this past week at the age of 48 due to colorectal cancer.
What it was like to look at you and know not just what you were thinking, but also what you were feeling, because I was feeling the same thing. Last year, you had the opportunity to go to Paris and study, and because of me, you didn't.
Dawson, that wasn't your fault.
Yes, it was my fault, because I should have made you go.
Dawson.
Joe, go. I'm telling you, before I take it all back, all right? Just go.
This is your opportunity
for
here.
you. Playing football in West Canaan may have been the opportunity of your lifetime, but I don't want your life.
Vanderbeek was best known for his roles in Dawson's Creek and Varsity Blues. He was diagnosed with stage 3 colorectal cancer in August 2023 after he had a colonoscopy. His death raises awareness about the disease, which is one of the deadliest kinds of cancers among adults. Let's talk about it with Dr. William Chapman. Dr. Chapman is a WashU colorectal surgeon with Siteman Cancer Center at Barnes Jewish Hospital. Dr. Chapman, thanks a lot for joining us again.
Sure. It's great to be here. Thank you for making the time to talk about important industry issues like this.
How common is colon cancer in someone in their 40s?
Well, it's becoming much more common, and that is one of the really concerning features, that stories like this bring up. When you think about colon cancer, it is still the most common in folks who are older, 60 and above. But what we have seen over the past several decades is that while the incidence of colon cancer in those older folks is going down, there is a concerning trend in the rise of colon cancer for younger patients.
Why is that?
That's the million or billion dollar question. We really don't have a great grasp on what's causing this increase for young folks. And there are lots of theories out there, from things like dietary changes that have happened over the past 30 to 40 years to microplastics or other environmental factors, as well as changes in our behavior. In general, especially in the Western world, we tend to lead more sedentary lives. There's also the rise of certain other medical comorbidities like obesity or diabetes that may be linked to this as well. But I'll tell you, I see more and more folks who are young coming down with this disease. And, these people come from all walks of life and in all shapes and sizes. There really isn't a clear pattern that we've identified yet.
So then let's talk about awareness. When should someone schedule their first colonoscopy?
Well, that depends a little bit on their risk factors. And we are doing a lot of research, both here in St. Louis as well as nationally and internationally, to try and better understand who's most at risk for this. We know that if you have a family member who has a history of colon cancer, your risk is elevated. If that family member was under 50, then we recommend any of those family members who are primary relatives to start their screening colonoscopies 10 years before the date or the age at which that patient was diagnosed with their cancer. So if you had a brother who was diagnosed with colon cancer at 48, we'd recommend all other siblings to start their screening colonoscopies at 38. And same goes for the children of that patient as well. But there's also, a lot of uncertainty around other risk factors. So while the government and national organizations right now recommend for everyone to start at 45, it is important to pay attention to some of these other family-related factors, which may mean that you need those scopes sooner.
How frequently should they be done?
There's a little bit of variation there, too. A lot of times we will base the recommendation for your next colonoscopy on what was found at that first scope. So if you're an average person with no family or other known risk factors and you get your first colonoscopy at 45 and it's clean or there's no abnormalities, then usually we recommend folks go 7 to 10 years before their next one. On the other hand, if you've got polyps or other precancerous type changes in the colon, we're going to be doing that scope sooner. And just how soon really depends on what we find and how many polyps, for example, might be there.
Does it have to be a colonoscopy? Are there other options that you like?
There are multiple options. And what I would say to patients who ask me that question is something is better than nothing. There are a series of different stool-based tests that either look for pieces of cancer DNA within the stool or look for things like blood products in the stool, which should not normally be there, and might serve as an early indicator that something has changed and that person needs to come in for a scope. That being said, nothing is as effective as a colonoscopy, where we can really look at what exactly is happening inside the colon.
And if you see something in the colon, you can take care of it right away.
Exactly. So if you do one of these stool-based tests and it comes back positive, well, now you got to get set up for the colonoscopy and go through the whole deal. If you start with the colonoscopy at the beginning, it's a one-shot, test, and we can intervene at the same time. And I think it's really important to stress to folks that taking out polyps is preventive. I mean, these are lesions that, left to their own devices, will turn into a cancer at some point. So that colonoscopy is not only telling you, what risk factors you might have for developing a cancer in the future, but it's also helping prevent something from turning into a cancer.
We're talking with Dr. William Chapman. Dr. Chapman is a Washington University colorectal surgeon with Siteman Cancer Center at Barnes Jewish Hospital. Dr. Chapman, does colon cancer affect men or women more?
It affects both. For certain types of cancers, we do see some gender differences. So, for example, in rectal cancer, there is a higher preponderance in men. And in the early onset cancers, we're thinking that we're seeing a higher preponderance in men. Exactly why that's happening, we're not sure. And at least right now, the rates of advanced disease and the deaths related to these cancers do seem to be somewhat equivalent between men and women.
Who's at high risk? What factors make you at high risk?
We know a few things definitely increase your risk. So back to that family history question. If you have a known relative who has a colon cancer, your risk is higher. We also know that obesity has some link to cancer development, and diabetes seems to also have a link to cancer development. There have been some specific environmental exposures which suggest increased risks. For example, the military and Veterans Affairs groups are looking right now at whether burn pit exposure increases risk to colon cancer, but that affects a more specific population. We think ultimately that there's some environmental changes that have happened in our diet that must be related to this increase in young onset. We just haven't been able to put our finger on exactly what that is.
You mentioned diet. What do we need to know about our diet? What would put us at higher risk because of our diet, and what should our diet be to prevent it?
Another great question, and still a lot of research in development here. There are some clear things that can be done to decrease your risk related to fiber intake. So we know that the more fiber folks eat and consume, the more frequently they will have bowel movements, and we think that that decreases overall inflammation in the colon. And that's good for just general gut health as well. So I recommend to my patients that they not only focus on eating lots of fresh fruits and vegetables, but also take a fiber supplement like psyllium husk or Metamucil to help them contain or continue regular bowel movements.
What if you eat a lot of red meat?
A bit of a controversy there. I think that the folks who eat high proportions of red meat, especially if it's fried or high fat content red meat, that does have a signal for increased risk in cancer, but some of that can be offset by fiber intake. When people ask me what's the one thing that I can do to help my diet and reduce my cancer risk, I really focus on the fiber. Yes, I think for global health, probably reducing red meat is also good. That'll affect things like your cardiovascular health. But from the GI standpoint, that fiber intake really seems to be critical.
As a colorectal surgeon and someone who does a lot of colonoscopies, how many lives do you think you've saved by just doing a colonoscopy?
Hard for me to calculate that, but there are many, many people who come in with no symptoms, and we find either big advanced polyps or early stage cancers. The key to any of the treatments for colon or rectal cancer is catching it early. So when we catch these at earlier stages, we have lots of treatment options. Sometimes that involves surgery, sometimes chemotherapy, sometimes radiation. But we certainly have more options early in the game than if folks are presenting with more advanced cancers. And again, oftentimes these cancers are completely without symptoms, until it reaches things like your cardiovascular health. But from the GI standpoint, that fiber intake really seems to be critical.
As a colorectal surgeon and someone who does a lot of colonoscopies, how many lives do you think you've saved by just doing a colonoscopy?
Hard for me to calculate that, but there are many, many people who come in with no symptoms, and we find either big advanced polyps or early stage cancers. And, you know, the key to any of the treatments for colon or rectal cancer is catching it early. So when we catch these at earlier stages, we have lots of treatment options. Sometimes that involves surgery, sometimes chemotherapy, sometimes radiation. But we certainly have more options early in the game than if folks are presenting with more advanced cancers. And again, oftentimes these cancers are completely without symptoms until it reaches a very advanced stage.
Dr. Chapman, what's the main message you want people to take away from this interview?
The key is your screening and paying attention to your risk factors, in particular, your family history. For a lot of families out there, it's hard to talk about tough medical diagnoses, especially something like cancer. It's critical for everyone else in the family, though, to know about these things, because that right now is the most important thing that guides our decision-making around screening, which is the key.
Dr. Chapman, thanks so much for your time. Really do appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Fred. It's been great being on.
Dr. William Chapman is a WashU colorectal surgeon with Siteman Cancer Center